Good morning and welcome to the latest episode of the Turn It Round the Corner podcast. Today I am joined by someone that I've known for a very long time, good friend of mine, Scotty O'Donoghue. OD, how you doing, mate?
Not bad, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, all good. Sun is shining. Hopefully, spring and summer is on its way. So, Scott, someone I've known for a long time. Obviously, good player in your time. We'll get to that, but I think you've had a really varied and interesting sort of all level experience in football. You're currently at Coventry. So yeah, tell me about what's your current role, what's your title, and what you've been getting up to.
Yeah, so joined the club in September. My job title as such is the Emerging Talent Coordinator.
Right.
So I sit in the first team, recruitment team, and which is a new experience for myself. And I focus on boys that are sort of first year scholar to our development squad. So really 16, 17 up to 21. Um, so it's a few age groups, but the players that come into our building at that age that are more non-first team players are people that fall into my sort of category. So the first team players that are that age will be I'll scout and I'll watch and I'll do reports on. But I'm generally looking for players that are in non-league or are playing at other academies that might get released. So it's just knowing that age group, and it is a national role, which is obviously quite vast. But it's a busy role. But that's my I'm going to say specialised area. Not sure if I'm quite a specialist yet, but 'cause there's so much to cover. But that's the area that I actually enjoy recruiting for and scouting. So that's where it falls onto me.
So you're looking ideally, probably, Scotty, for people. What is your structure? So for people to filter into your youth team, and then I suppose an under 21 or old school B team for those players to filter into.
Yeah, so the setup is we're Cat 2 club. So the setup is we have obviously a youth team, which is under 17s, under 18s, 2 years. And then we have the development squad, which is under 21s. So we play in the PDL, Professional Development League. So that's the Cat 2 league. And that is, yeah, as it says, it's the development age group. It's the boys that are stepping up from the youth team. And obviously that gap between the youth team and the first team, which during that process involves perhaps going out on loan. But my role will be to bring players into the scholarship ages, the youth team, but also predominantly the early years of the development squad. Anybody coming into the building that like is 20, 21, they really have to be around the first team. Um,
Sure.
Again, that's general rule, but then you do get boys that are coming perhaps out of non-league that haven't been in the system. And again, you can perhaps look at players a little bit older when they're in that bracket.
So Scotty, like currently, how many players do you have in and around that 21s, and how many of them are out on loan? Like, is it a case by case basis in regards to loans? Like, is it yeah, what's the thinking around that? So players wise, and then is every development sort of specific, or are you looking at a certain age or a certain time to get those boys out on loan, or does some even just stay around the first team group?
Yeah, it's all individual. It's all individual. It all depends on the player. It depends on where they're at that time. A lot of them obviously might be late developers. Physically might not be ready for playing men's football. But then there'll be others that have sort of been in the 21s group when they're in the youth team and played up, and therefore they need to go out and experience men's football. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Being in that environment that me and you know so well, in the
Yeah.
chamber with men. And playing to win, and managers that have got let's not get it right. They've got pressure on them to get results. Okay, so completely different environment. Take them out of their comfort zone. Okay, which is obviously in the academy environment. So it all depends on the player, where they're at, how much football they've done. But you've also got to get it right, Christian. You can't just send a player out on loan for the sake of sending the player out on loan. They've got to go to the right club.
Correct.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
have the right manager around them, and you don't always get it right. Okay, but every experience helps. Okay, you just got to make sure that if it isn't a particularly good one, then they're looked after when they come back in the building, and then when you get the next loan option, it's got to be right. So when you're some players don't necessarily go out on loan. Some players go straight to the first team, or get in and around the first team, and therefore they need to be in the building. Do you know what I mean? They need to be around
Sure.
someone like Frank. They need to be training every single day with the first team because clearly that takes you up a level anyway. So it is all very individual, and our club do it well. We obviously look to try and get the players out that need to play. We also need to make sure that there's a few that stay in the building because they might be training with the first team once or twice a week. They're good to help out some of the 16s, 17s that might be playing up. So it's a whole like different sort of picture you've got to look at. And ultimately what's best for the individual and obviously the club.
Yeah, and it's a big club, commentary, right? Like we had this conversation the other day. It's probably one of the teams that someone that we both know, Richard Keogh, is one of the clubs that I went to quite a lot to watch him play, and obviously they've had their troubles in their past, a bit like Orient and lots of other clubs recently. But I feel like there's a real sort of swirl of positivity around the club. Like they're obviously since Frank's come in, they've gone on a great run. Have you seen the club change like from a let me say from an exposure point of view? Obviously, Mark Robbins was a great manager. I think he's done a really good job. Obviously, he's had a really good managerial career. But obviously, in terms of stature, like Frank was a world class player. He had a lot of, should we say, history to his name, right? Have you noticed that the club's like just steps it up a little bit since he come in? Like, have you seen any of his sessions? Like, what would you say his big sort of appeal has been for the football club?
Well, going to the first question with regards to the size of the club, yeah, it's big. It's really
It is.
big. And do you know
Yeah,
what? They broke my heart as a 9-year-old. First time I ever went to Wembley. '87, mate. So
yeah. Keith Houchin, yeah.
I was a front row and they had the metal fences at Wembley.
Great
So
cut final that. I think our era, everyone remembers that cut final, don't they? 3-2. I think
exactly
that's
right. Exactly
yeah,
right. I mean, I went to that, as I say, it's first time at Wembley. I actually went the following year, I think it was Liverpool Wimbledon. I went to that game as well. As a neutral, I think there were quite a few tickets available in the Wimbledon end. But yeah, so I mean, I remember Coventry as you say, talking about that team and Brian Kilcline and Dave Bennett
yeah,
was pass on the day. Um, and for me, then growing up, and then when the Premier League era started, Coventry were like a Premier League club. Do you remember like Dion Dublin and you know what I mean? And they had
I
some.
always quite like Coventry, right, Scotty, because of that. They had Dion Dublin, Darren Huckabee, like Stephen Grisovich in goal. They were like one of them teams that like no one really disliked, right? You wanted them
No,
to do
exactly
well
right.
because they were like one of the underdogs.
Exactly right. Richard Shaw, David Boast.
Yeah,
There's a lot of players you can just remember that played in that strip. So, yeah, a big club. And again, it's generational, isn't it? I mean, listen, you look at some of the kids growing up now. They've got a different perspective on football,
yeah,
on who the big
massively.
clubs are, right? Again, yeah, I won't mention certain clubs, but since 2000 and whatever, when money's come into it, certain clubs have kicked on, and ultimately for us, us guys in our mid 40s, there's certain clubs you remember as a big club, or you remember them as Premier League clubs, and I think Coventry is one of those. So, I mean, the average attendance I think is 26,000, which is good.
Yeah,
Um,
decent.
they've got a good away following. Good catchment area as well. I mean, obviously just south of Birmingham. But you've got some big clubs in Birmingham with some big fan bases like the Villas, etc. of the world and what have you. But ultimately, Coventry, I think they are they've been through a tough time. They've obviously gone down the leagues. Mark Robins done exceptionally well. Um, they've come back up. They've had obviously issues with the ground and where they've been.
Yeah,
And they've been on an upward curve for the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years, which is great. Um, for whatever reason, obviously the chairman spoke about it on some of his interviews with regards to what happened and why he made a change.
yeah,
Um, Frank's come in, and again goes, I suppose, back to what I just said there about this current generation of people. Everybody knows Frank Lampard.
yeah,
Okay,
100%.
he was a top player, great pro, and I think, being honest with you, I've had this discussion a lot of times with people. A lot of people go, "Oh, well, that's a bit of a strange one. What's he ever done?" Sort of thing from a managerial perspective. And I think, to be honest with you, when you actually look at what he has done, he done really well with Derby, getting them into the
Yeah,
playoffs. And then he's managed Chelsea. Now, it ain't easy to manage Chelsea, especially what's happened in the last few years. So he's in that period. He's brought in a lot of young players, and basically had to steer a tough ship. And the same at Everton. Everton have been in a bad way for a massive club for a few years now, and he kept them up, and that's an achievement. So I think that he perhaps is, because of how things ended at Everton and perhaps how things were at Chelsea, because he didn't get success there and they've been used to success at Chelsea. I think people that sort of know football will look at it and go, well, he actually's done a fairly good job. He's done what he had to do. Does that make sense?
sure, 100%.
I think now that he's come into our environment, he's got a good deck of cards. Okay, as a chairman, that's the chairman's line. So I'm copying that. There's some good players, some good
Mm,
players. And as we talked about, they're a big club, and they perhaps needed that change. And with his sort of stature, I suppose, status, um, he seems good with the players. But all the players will look up to him because they know him. Does that make sense? They know what
yeah,
he
of course.
achieved, and you have that respect, I think it is. So listen, touch wood, it continues to go in the right direction, and they stay where the playoffs are, and you never know. I mean, I think it's fair to say that Leeds will win the league, which they should do with their budget, and then Sheffield, maybe Burnley, I don't know, but
Mm.
hopefully we can get in the playoffs, and then you never know, mate. It's a funny old game.
Exactly, mate. There's a couple of points off the back of that. One, I think I saw I think the media team put out his first um, like talk to the players on his first day. And he just seemed very personable. Like you could see the players like full attention. Um, and as you say, big character, someone that's been there, seen it, done it. And as you say, players are going to look up to that. But then very, I'd say, tight in that chasing pack in it. So you've got, as you say, Leeds and Sheffield United that are probably, or Burnley, going to make it. You've then got Sunderland, but there's like a 10-point gap, I think, when I looked last week from Coventry to Sunderland. So I suppose the aim is to get into the playoffs and then anything can happen, right? I suppose what was there, 10 games to go? So I've just pulled up the table now. So yeah, Coventry 53, and then within the space of say 3 points, you've got about five or six clubs. So I suppose
It's a big club.
consolidate. Yeah,
Big club. West Brom, Bristol City are a big club. Obviously, Borough, Blackburn.
yeah,
There's some big teams in that. And again, goes back to what we were talking about earlier on about when we were growing up, who the Premier League teams were.
yeah, one
I
hundred
mean,
percent.
Sunderland, do you know what I mean? West Brom, Blackburn. Blackburn won the Premier League, right?
Yeah,
Middlesbrough. We always remember the teams that Middlesbrough had back in the day with some unbelievable players, Ravanellis of the world and Janino. So these are big clubs, and um, I think that just shows where we are, like at the size of our club, that we can get into this sort of mix. And listen, how football is, anything can happen, right? Injuries or a bit turn of form, lack of confidence, whatever it might be. But at the moment, as I say, it's just we're on a good run. and we're getting points. And if we can continue that, then as you say, we might well be able to stay in the playoffs. Automatic does look a bit too far off, but you've got to aim high, right?
And that's it, mate. And I don't think people realise, like going back, like I say that to people, being an Orient fan, like I think there's 8 or 9 teams in League One that have been in the Premier League, and if you look down the top 10, say in the Championship, Leeds, Sheffield United, Burnley, Sunderland, Cov, West Brom, Blackburn, Middlesbrough, Watford. The only one in that top 10 that hasn't played in the Premier League is Bristol City. So it's a big league, the Championship, right? And I think I personally love the Championship because I used to think it about the Premier League. I'd say in the last 5 or 6 years that's changed, but I think anyone on their day in the Championship, if you don't turn up and you're not on it, then you can easily get rolled over. It's a very, very competitive league. I think most people say it's the fourth. Is it the fourth supported league in the world? Um, Obviously, that shows you its strength. Lastly, Scott, I just want to touch on. So you spoke at the start about the academy and being a cat two for people out there, and obviously we've got various experience, and we'll get to that of academy football and setups. How can you go from being a Cat 2 academy to Cat 1? Obviously, in our day, South East Counties, it was all just like normal football, promotion, relegation. Now it's on facilities, staff, etc. So, do you know how like a club like yours would go from being a Cat 2 to a Cat 1?
To be honest, with you, I don't know the ins and outs exactly how it works, but
Right,
I am aware there's a couple of clubs at the moment that are Cat 2 that are trying to go to a Cat 1 status.
right,
And you just hit the nail on the head. It's about staffing, it's about facilities. Um, and basically you have to have a certain amount of pitches, you have to have a certain amount of staff at each age group, you have to have a certain people in your recruitment team, a certain number, etc. And you have to basically invest X amount of money compared to what you have to invest as a Cat 2 club. So it's sort of a grander or a bigger investment and a whole infrastructure put in towards your academy. And
right.
that's basically how it works. And then you have to obviously, you get audited. It's similar to like schools with Ofsted. You get audited and you have to make sure that you're doing everything correctly, going through the right protocols. And that's across the whole academy. I've had experience of an audit before at my previous club, and it's very thorough. And you have sort of each department has to show their trail, for want of a better word, and how they do things, and
Yeah,
and and that's how you're basically graded. And obviously, if you don't hit the grade, then if you're trying to go from 2 to 1, then obviously you won't go to Cat 1. But likewise, you can not hit the grade and you can lose your Cat 2 status, and then you'd have to go down to. You get given a certain amount of time to improve and show that you've improved and put things into place,
sure.
and reassessed, and then. Again, if you keep failing, then you'll end up losing your Cat 2 status. So I don't know the specifics of what's required staffing wise or each department, but it's very much just about the number of staff, the number of the facilities that you have, etc., and provide, and how much money you pump into the academy.
Yeah, it's like for Cat 3 to Cat 2, for instance, you have to have a dome, don't you? As I say,
That's
it's
a prime
facility.
example,
Yeah,
exactly, and that's where there's a like I think it's Luton that are Cat 3 that don't have the dome that
yeah.
they can't go to Cat 2 because they are a very good academy. Yeah.
Really good, and that was always obviously when Bert was at Orient. That was always the shout that Luton and Bournemouth are best Cat 3 in the country. I know Bournemouth obviously have got building a new training ground and roll it out, but yeah, they couldn't jump up because of the dome. So, Scotty, bringing it back to your role. So, speak, you're out watching games. Like, tell me about sort of a week in the life of an emerging talent coordinator. What's obviously you've got paperwork, you've got games, you're probably going to the training ground. Just let the listeners know sort of a week in your life sort of thing,
Yeah, obviously no week's the same, but generally,
which is good, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, yeah, it is good. Although sometimes you like a little routine. But I would say that I go into the training ground probably at least once a fortnight, sometimes
Right.
like once a week, and there's times when I've done twice a week. So that might be to go into the recruitment meeting, first team recruitment meeting, and then I'll also have meetings as well with the academy manager and the academy head of recruitment. So if that's say a Thursday, which it usually is monthly, then I might be in twice that week. What I will try to do, Christian, is if I'm in on a Tuesday with the first team, I'll try and catch a game that evening, local to the training ground or on
Right.
the way down. But generally speaking, on a Monday you do get quite a lot of the Premier League two games. Okay, so 21's games on a Monday. Some are in the afternoon, more PDO in the afternoon, but then in the evening it would be a games program for the under 21s. So Monday usually paperwork, catching up from the weekend,
Yeah.
and also, and I say this now because I'm in the situation at the moment where I've got so many reports to catch up on because I did so many games last week because it was the FA Youth Cup quarterfinals. Um, so normally you'd sort of set your Monday aside for that or a day, but then what's happening because it's this time of the year, I'm getting chucked players left, right, and centre from agents. So I'm
Sure.
also trying to jump onto those clips as soon as I can to have a look at them. So that Monday that I'll put aside this week for paperwork is going to get completed after this today. Do you know what I mean? So that's how it works. You have to continually uh, act on what gets presented to you, if that makes sense. So
Mm.
normally Monday, paperwork, watch a game in the evening, if there are games. If not, then Tuesday, potentially a meeting in the training ground. And I try to do a non-league game on a Tuesday night, or an EFL trophy game if the EFL trophy is on, and watch some of the 21s teams play men's teams, which I think is really important to see how
Sure.
they compete against the full-time men's pros, for want of a better word. Wednesday again is there's not too much of a games program. I don't do under 15s anymore, or I did occasionally at my last club, but that would be the Floodlit Cup on a Wednesday. But so for me, Wednesday again would be maybe a college game during the day because a lot of the college programs play on a Wednesday.
Right.
That will be again dealing with agents, or if I'm doing a game on Friday night and I'm doing Thursday, then Wednesday might be midday where I'll take it easy and have a bit of time off to relax and walk the dog and what have you. Um, Thursday is basically the type of game where you'd be watching videos and acting on players that have been sent to you, dealing with agents, and then Friday there's usually a game on a Friday, whether it be the afternoon or the evening. And again, probably 21s football. And then Saturday, you've obviously got 18s program in the morning. Occasionally, I do the odd 16s game. Occasionally, if I need to help out with any scholars for next year. And then Saturday afternoon will be again predominantly a non-league game to catch up on some of the players that might have been flagged. And then Sunday is roast dinner day, mate, basically, with the family.
So, a couple of questions off the back of that. Obviously, for people that don't know, Scotty, when you talk about obviously paperwork, you're a scout, you're in the football world. Obviously, you're not working in an office. Talk to the listeners about the sort of paperwork that you need to do. So, you go out and watch Jack Jones, and then obviously you have to do that report, and does that go into your chief scout? How does that work?
Yeah, so if I go to say, use an example. If I go to a 21s game, okay, on a Monday night, I will be given a couple of players that might have been flagged already
Yeah.
or are on the system from the recruitment analyst. And then I would be asked, can you put a report in on Jack Jones? So I would then also, for my own sort of emerging talent sort of database, for want of a better word, I would also, if I haven't got ever seen a player before, then I'll put a little bit down about them as well. Okay, i.e.,
Sure.
size, position, etc. Do they move well, whatever it might be. And then, so the next day, for example, that's a Monday night. On Tuesday, I would then go on to the recruitment system, okay, that we have at the club, and then I would put in a report on that player, and I would talk about obviously his strengths, weaknesses, physical, tactical, technical, etc. The four corners, and then give them my opinion on how he did on the night and what I think we should do next. So it goes on to that system, and then that obviously flags up to my line manager and the recruitment analysts, and then they at their end they do what they do behind the scenes, and then obviously when a certain amount of reports go in, if they're good, then that's when you start acting on it, etc., etc. So that's basically what when we say paperwork, it's catching up with the match reports. And
Sure.
I generally do, if I'm told to do a specific player, then obviously I focus on that player. If I'm there watching the game and no one's sort of been flagged up to me specifically, then I'll do a report on the sort of best player or two best players on the pitch or three best players, depending on people how people do. And then I have to obviously put that report on the system. So, when you're watching, like I did, for example, last week, I did the three FA Youth Cup quarterfinals that were on. I did an 18s game with two teams that I'd not seen in the Midlands while I was up in Coventry, and then I also did the game on Saturday that I went to. So those five games, that's a lot of work
Yeah,
to
sure.
upload when you're putting like, do you know what I mean? Maybe two, three players on each one, and that takes time. But I think one of the things about this job generally, and I think anybody that's been in the game quite a long time on this side will tell you, is it's managing your workload. It's being organised, and like I've mentioned earlier, a lot of curveballs get chucked in. Do you know what I mean? If a player suddenly gets text to you that has become available and not got his pro deal or is can come out or whatever, then you've got to act on it. That's what recruitment's about. So when you're then reacting on that, that match report you were going to do gets pushed aside. Do you see what I mean? Because you've got to do what you've got to do. And that's where it can be a bit stressful, but that's where you've got to manage your time well. Do you know what I mean? You've got to get things in order. And I'll be brutally honest with you, because of that workload I had last week, I'm a little bit behind. But I'll get that sorted out, get them on the system, and then we move forward to the next game.
That makes sense, mate. And it's a great explanation. I've got some follow ups on that about the actual game stuff. But let's talk about, like you've mentioned a couple of times. So we're getting to what I'd call the business end of the season. As you say, there's young pros or scholars that are going to be advised pretty soon, probably this month. They haven't been told before that, they're getting a pro deal, they're not getting a pro deal. They might be first year pro that's getting released. So how does that come about? So you've said a couple of times, so agents will contact you directly, or the clubs. Obviously, there's lists that go out to clubs that notify, other clubs that, Jack Jones is going to be released. Talk to us a little bit about that, this time of the year, and as you say, the workload that can come off the back of that, because certain individuals become available.
Yeah, so I think so the scholars get their decisions at the end of December, the 31st. So
Yeah,
then obviously from an academy recruitment department, if you take X amount and you've got three spaces left and you need a fullback or whatever, then this period now is when you're scouting or watching the boys that haven't been offered a scholarship at the other clubs, or you've got them in on trial. Okay. The first year pros, i.e. the scholars that aren't getting a pro deal, or the first years that might get released, this is the time, as you say, they don't have to give them a decision until near the end of the season, really.
yeah,
But ultimately, a lot of clubs do the right thing by the boys, and they will send out an email. Player Care will send out an email to the clubs on the EFL and the Premier League list. So it will go into the clubs, and then obviously you get a profile with clips and data, etc., physical stats. And that's useful, because there's certain clubs perhaps that you're not well connected to, shall we say, but that will still get to you as a recruiter through I don't know, through the academy manager receiving the email, or through the academy head of recruitment receiving the email, or through the player care officer receiving the email at our club, and then it will get forwarded out to the recruitment team. But realistically, this is where your network comes into play. This is where you have relationships with agents. This is where you have relationships with other clubs, and also where you should have done and hopefully have done your due diligence leading up to this time. I.e.,
Sure.
if Jack Jones comes out of um, say Arsenal. Jack Jones is coming out of Arsenal because you thought he might be coming out of Arsenal because they've got somebody 2 years below that's absolutely top draw, or they've got
Sure.
somebody a year above that's playing in the first team, or whatever it might be. You have an inkling as to whether or not these players might come out. And therefore, you do your due diligence, you make sure you've got your reports on them, and you try and find out who the agent is, and you obviously, you let them know that when, if and when they find out their decision, can they please let you know? And then it's your chance to act on it. And if you can get them in on trial, then I have to liaise with my departments in the office to say, look, can you sort out digs for me? And then all the paperwork needs to get sorted out, get permission from the parent club, and it's just that process. So it's it's a mixture of the clubs obviously doing the right thing and letting the clubs know that they're not taking on a player as a pro, so they let other people know. It's the agent's job to make sure that they're proactive and they let people know that their boys aren't being available. And likewise, from a recruitment perspective, it's just being on the button. You know what I mean? Being ready for it, but also knowing internally where you are as well, i.e., what sort of players you're going to be looking for. Do you know what I mean? There's no point in having three strikers in the building, and they're all getting an extra year at our building, and then a
Sure.
player of Tottenham, Arsenal, Chelsea. Do you know what I mean? Millwall, and we like him. If we can't take him because we won't be able to give him the pathway because we've got players in our building. So you need to know what you need internally, and then that's why you need to then focus on the areas that you need to recruit in. And as I say, your due diligence will be done, and you'll know which players you like. But then there'll be players that get chucked into you by an agent. You're like, oh, not had eyes on him, or have had eyes on him, but didn't, can't remember the game. Go to your reports, have a look, or just pick the phone up to somebody in the building that you know. If a player gets released from a club and you know someone really well at the club, pick the phone up. Is he good? What's his attributes, character, etc. So you do your due diligence there as well. So you've got to be on the money. You've got to be sharp. But it is tough when there's so many players that become chucked at you or get chucked at you at this time of the year. It's non-stop because you're getting them from all over the place, Christian. You're
Yeah.
getting new players, obviously, and it's interesting. We talked about this before. There seems to be an influx of non-league players. Okay, we're in March. Okay, so there's
Yeah.
an influx of non-league players that I think have perhaps maybe adjusted to men's football. Do you know what I mean? And these are boys, obviously, I'm talking about between the ages of 17, 18, 19. They maybe have adjusted to men's football and now they're blossoming. Do you know what I mean? In the non-league environment. So there seems to be a little bit of an influx of players that have been flagged up for non-league. Then you've got all of the pros or second-year scholars that aren't getting their contracts that are coming through. Plus, you've obviously got players from Northern Ireland or do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Scotland, etc., that are becoming available or are turning 18, so therefore they can come over to England. So it's just a whole different I suppose, areas that these players are coming from, and you need to sort of try and manage that and stay on top of it.
Would you say now that Scotty, obviously you brought it up a couple of times, would you say now that every child sort of that's in as a scholar or, should we say the rising stars of non-league that are maybe on people's radar, would you say now that all them kids have got an agent?
Um, yeah, getting that way, getting
Yeah.
that way. Yeah, I mean, yeah, predominantly. I mean, there's always players that are that have parents that are good. Do you know what I mean? And understand. And there's also ones that have parents that won't take an agent because they think that they know best, and they think that they can control their kids' career. And do you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
I think yeah, I mean that's a different story, so I won't go into that. But I think that majority of them now do have agents, yeah, and the non-leagues becoming more and more because do you know what? Because it's a good market. That's the reality.
Yeah.
There's certain agents, and I won't mention them because it's not the place to do it. But there's certain agents that are very good in non-league, very good, and they're ones that I speak to. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And there's ones that I will go to and go, you know, talk to me. What have you got? You've normally always got a good one coming through. Where are we now? And you know, I get told about players that are playing in like step two up north or step three up north, ones that I've never ever heard of, and you know, I've got to try and get some information on. Do you know what I mean? So
Mm.
they are more and more that are taking agents in the non-league game, and I think that helps them with their exposure, right? And that tries to get them out there. And listen, Christian, it's all off the back of Jamie Vardy.
Yeah, of course.
Jamie Vardy. It's still that Jamie Vardy story that basically has highlighted because there's always been players coming through obviously the non-league route, but because of how successful he's been and what he's done, now it's becoming more and more common, and now it's a little bit of a situation where, you know, the different platforms are being put in place now. The Instagram, social media, you know, it's highlighting players that are of a certain age that are playing at a certain step. So there's a lot more exposure, and a lot of clubs, I think. Listen, I think as a recruiter, if you can take a boy out of grassroots or non-league and take them into a professional environment and they succeed, then that's a buzz.
Yeah.
That's a nice feeling. Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure we're going to talk about what I did previously, and a lot of what I did previously was based on that because that's where I had to fish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, so
Brilliant.
it is. There's definitely more agents involved on that side, Vic.
Great answer. So lastly, then, Scotty, obviously it's a busy time of the year. You've been flagged up to go and watch someone. You know, there might be another couple of players playing in that game. How do you prepare for a game? So you've got a report, you've probably got your notebook. Talk to me about you've been sent to watch a player at let's say Harlow Town, for instance, a club you both know very well. You've been flagged up a player. How do you prepare for that game, and then on that the game itself, like what are you doing to assist you make that decision?
Um, so player flagged up and he's playing for Hertford Town on Saturday afternoon. Firstly, again, time of the year. I mean, Harlow's obviously an Astro pitch, so it doesn't get called off. But if it wasn't at Harlow,
Yeah,
you be on Twitter to make sure that it's not called off. I have done it once this season where I haven't done that, and I've got to a game and it's been called off. So, um, slap on the wrist for me, but that does happen. So you need to firstly make sure the game's on. Okay, get there early. Okay, I used a notebook, but I've actually stopped using it now. I now use my phone. Okay. And what I would do is I
what
will.
why is that, mate? Why have you changed?
I don't. Do you know what? I don't actually know. I think partly, do you know, one of the reasons is because when I'm out and about, if I was out, say with you and whatever, and you said, "Oh, have you seen Christian Wheeler playing at X under 18?" I would go on my phone and I go, I watched him. I know pretty much when I watched him. I go, I watched him in December, and I go on my phone, I go to my notes, and I'll have that on me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
It's having it at your disposal, but also, um, I just, yeah, for some reason, I think perhaps I've got better at using my phone. Does that make sense? And also the other side to it is if you're using your phone, and I would if I was doing the whole team, I'd have it all sort of put down on my phone, number one, with the names. And before the game, I'd write down the names of the players that were playing so that I can then put a few little bits and pieces about each one of the players if I was watching a professional game. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
hadn't seen the players. If it's a specific player and I was going to Harlow, then I'd have the air on my phone. I'd have obviously the tactical, the technical, and the four corners down. And then I would start making notes during the game, or at half time, I would then start doing my notes on each particular corner, because ultimately then I can then cut and paste it into my email, and then it goes onto the system quicker.
Right.
So it's
Okay.
basically, if I put it on a notepad, I then got to type the notepad up as well. Does that make sense? Whereas
Yeah.
it does save a little bit of time. But also, I just say I like the fact that I have it at my disposal. Listen, there's a lot of scouts out there that still use the notebook. I do occasionally. But again, it's just personal choice. But I think you're always evolving. You're always evolving. And again, like I said to you before, time management, you're always looking at ways that you can save time or ways that you can be more effective, I suppose, at what you're doing.
Yeah.
I would do that. But then I would watch the player. And this is where video analysis is really good and you can use it. But there are certain things I think you miss on the video. Okay. And that's why when I'm watching games live, and I watched a game recently where it was actually against my club that I support. And it's the first time I've ever gone to watch a game against my club I support. And I wasn't actually watching the match. I was watching the
Mm.
player I was specifically watching. And that was quite tough for me because, as I say, as a supporter of that club, I'm sort of, but ultimately my focus was on this player, and you just watch them the whole game. You watch what their movements are off the ball. You watch how they're communicating. The whole sort of different angles that you can see, and then you take your notes as you go down. And then if you're watching the game, obviously might be a couple of players that you think, oh, okay, he's okay, and then maybe it's basically at half time, you go
Mm.
on to social media, you'd look at obviously you'd have a team sheet there, you go right. Greg Pike, okay, okay, he's under 18. He could be of interest to me. Do you see what I mean? So
Yeah.
you then do your little bit of due diligence at half time on the player that you've flagged up, because ultimately if he's 22, 3 years old, then he's not going to be for me. Does that make sense?
No.
No
100%.
disrespect, if he's playing for Harlow Town, he ain't going to be good enough for my first team. However, if he's an under 18 playing for Harlow Town and didn't know anything about him, then suddenly my focus goes a little bit onto him as well in the second half, or at
Yeah.
least I know I've got to come back and watch a game. So it's that evolving that word again, where you've just got to be sort of be prepared for anything. So once I've done that, I'll then go home. And to be honest with you, on a Saturday afternoon, if I'm getting back at say 6:30, I don't put the report on then. Okay, it probably would be ideal to do the report now and get it over and done with. But that's when you need to switch off and you need to spend time with your family and your kids. Do you know what I mean? On a Saturday after. So
100%.
so then that would go to the Monday, as we discussed earlier on. So yeah, you've got to be prepared. You've got to make sure you get there on time. Waze is the way forward. Okay, so I'll always be pressing Waze when I'm in my kitchen, just to
Yeah.
make sure that the traffic's suddenly, like if I'm going down to Kent and I've got to fight the Dartford Tunnel, you know what it's like. Suddenly it can take me an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and 50. So you've got to be prepared from that perspective. And then when you get there, you've got to get your sort of your phone ready, or if you're using your notes, get it all written down. And as they're warming up, you watch them, and you can turn around in the warm up and go, right, well, he's 5'10". Do you know what I mean? You don't have to wait to the game to start. So you can do those little bits and pieces. You can
Yeah.
work out what he is in the warm up, and you can also work out a lot about his character in the warm up. Do you know what I mean? And his mindset and his mentality. So it starts straight away, and the more prepared you are, it's like anything in life. If you
Course, mate.
if you don't prepare to fail, right? So you've got to be prepared. And then during the game, it alternates. I mean, if I'm at a game, for example, Harlow Town, there's half a chance I might know somebody. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or there won't necessarily be too many scouts there, but there might be somebody that I know. Okay, so you've also got to be prepared that at half time you might get clocked and you might have to, have a conversation with somebody. Likewise, if you go to a Premier League Two game, if there's certain scouts there, then maybe at half time I don't do my updating on my phone. Maybe I'm speaking to them, and
Yeah.
this I don't want this to sound bad, but when you speak to certain scouts, you get quite a bit of information. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Of
So
course.
it's always like not only there's other times, and obviously scouts that I haven't seen for a while that are really good guys, And you're like, how are you? Yeah, good. You know, what you're doing is it's more of a friendly, personal chat, right? But there are other times when you're speaking, or there might be agents that will come up to you and go, "Oh, I look after the number two." Oh, do you? So there's your note. That then goes on the system. Do you see what I
Mm.
mean? So you're always gathering information, but I say that in the sense that you don't want to be seen as somebody that's trying to gather information all the time. Does that make sense? Because that's a little bit could be seen as a little bit sneaky.
Yeah,
But
of course.
when you're speaking to people and you're having a conversation, sometimes things get flagged up to you, or sometimes things get said that ultimately could be useful, right?
Yeah, and I think that's important because sometimes someone will say to me, "What was a game like?" And I'll say, "I don't know," because you just firmly fixed on watching Jack Jones, right? You're not really
Yeah.
watching the game, and I think people get lost sometimes when they go to watch a game if they're there for a specific reason that they get too caught up watching the game and not that specific player.
Very
So
easy to,
Scott,
very easy to do that.
yeah, very easy. So Scotty, lastly, let's just say generically for players maybe that are in an academy or not in a professional academy, but say they're in a good non-league academy. They're looking to get into the professional game, or boys that are playing a decent standing in a non-league, and they're looking to make the step up. What are what are scouts looking for in a player these days? Give me some attributes that all players should be showing.
Um, Again, all players need to show the right mentality, right? The
Yeah,
right desire, determination, and specifically on depending on what position you're looking for, it will depend on obviously the other attributes that are required. So, you know, goalkeepers, if they're 5'6", then there's a unlikely that they're going to get scouted to play in the championship. So physical attributes will obviously take a part in that. But there are obviously, technical abilities that for a goalkeeper, for example, on the floor, that can be coached. Do you know what I mean? There's
hmm
certain things that what I think you find nowadays, especially when you're going to grassroots and when you're talking about like non-league, these players have got a lot of development to come. And when they
yeah,
play in a professional environment and touch the ball every single day, do you know what I mean, for 3 hours or whatever it might be, and they get strengthened, conditioned, and go on a proper diet, etc., they become different specimens. Do you know what I mean? They become different players. So you've always got to take that into consideration, especially at my age that I'm recruiting for, because I am looking for that development age. So the attributes that they have will have to be they have to have a certain level of technical ability.
yeah,
Obviously, physically they have to be at a certain level as well. Okay, and again, that's where you look at a player if they've got one particular attribute that is really quite impressive or elite, for example, pace. Um, then you've got to look at their game understanding, but then you can teach them how to play if they're a flying winger. Do you know what I mean? You can teach them their movements,
of
drop,
course.
leave the space in behind, and then spin. Or if they're technically okay, but their final product's not good enough, well, listen, if they've got that pace and they know how to use that pace and they can get into the areas, then you can work on the crossing, right? You can work on the end product. So it's specific to each particular position. But ultimately, one of the things that I like, and I think we might talk about this a bit later, is I like football intelligence. I like game understanding. Does that make sense? Because I feel that players, and it doesn't depend on a particular position. Obviously, whatever position you play, you've got to have an understanding of that role and use your nous and your intelligence to play it. All right, because if you can see the pass before you've even got the ball, for example, as a centre midfielder, then straight away that ticks a box for me. Do you know what I mean? Just seeing that picture. If you're a centre half like you were, perhaps not blessed with pace, but you know that ball's going to bounce there, and you're going to therefore put your body in the right place at the right time, where you're going to let him take his first touch because you know he's going to come into your right hand side, and then you're going to make your tackle because you know that's what's going to happen. That's cuteness, intelligence, right? And
Mm,
that's one of the hardest things to teach and coach, I think personally. I think
mm,
some players have got that footballing brain that they learn growing up as a kid. And I don't know how that is. Yes, some of it will be coaching, of course it will. But there's other parts to me that I just don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because they've watched football from a young age. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if nowadays it's some of these kids because they play FIFA non-stop, which look, you don't want your kid playing on the computer the whole time, but I think it does help their understanding of the game, right? And the
Yeah.
free pass, etc. So I'm very, very big on understanding the game and the sort of the tactical side of things and the football intelligence because I think that you can have a centre half that's really quick and puts his body on the line and wins his headers, but if he's playing against a really cute centre forward that's got up here, then it doesn't matter how quick you are or how strong you are if you can't position yourself in the right place or if you're too rash or whatever it might be. I think the understanding part of the game is really key. So that's one of the areas that I look for personally. Now that's not the same as every scout. Other scouts will purely look for physical attributes because they think they can
Mm.
work on the technical side, the tactical side. Um, so I think anybody that is playing non-league football that's at a young age, if they are, if they're tactically understand the game at a certain level, then that's good. I think if they are physically able to deal with the men's game and as we know, mate, the hustle and bustle and the elbows here and there, it gives them a really good chance in the academy because a lot of these boys that are in the academy haven't experienced that. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, 100%.
when it comes to that environment, like they'll go in and they'll put their body in, and when they get the tackle, they'll follow through. And like a lot of people in the academy boys will be like, "Oh, hold on a minute." So that's a good sign. And then obviously, yeah, it's the technical ability. What's their key technical attribute at the end of the day? Because technicals are very broad. Do they go and do they win their headers because their timing's really really good and they get up early? Do they play through the lines a lot? Can they break the lines? If they're a striker, do they have the ability to hit the ball early? Do you know what I mean? Or when they get and do they hit it far corner, bottom corner, make it hard for the goalkeeper? And if the keeper saves it, there's a rebound there. All these little things, different attributes that players have um, need to be taken into consideration based on, I think, what you're looking for, really, Christian, as regards to what you need in your team. But a lot of them can be definitely worked on when you're a non-league player because you haven't had that professional coaching.
Sure.
So it's quite a
Yeah.
long-winded answer, mate. It's very difficult to say exactly what, do you know what I mean? You look for because it does vary. It does vary completely.
And I agree, mate. As I say, I remember maybe over 10 years ago, Pat Walker telling me that the game had moved from a more, you know, should we say football first to maybe 60-40, 70-30, athletic attributes first, because to your point, they know that if they've got them athletic attributes and they get them in the building and, into full-time training, then, you can work on the other areas that are not as good. My only observation would be, to see, watch a lot of games, same as you, is I would say from our day, and this is just my generalisation, that I would say maybe skills gone up a little bit. The athleticism's gone up, pace has gone up, but the thing I struggle with is the game intelligence. I'm not sure the game intelligence is as good as it used to be. But everything I think in football comes in swings and roundabouts. So we'll see how that goes. So just squaring off on commentary, Scotty. So obviously you made the move in the summer. Like, it's been good for you. You're enjoying it. You're looking forward to the busy end of the season.
Yeah, enjoying it. Really good. And I I just feel that yeah, this is when you sort of as a recruiter you get to bring your players in and you get to sort of try and improve the group and give players opportunities. And you've got to be, as I say, you've got to be on your toes. So this is the fun part, mate. Definitely. And then yeah, we see whether we can be competitive, I suppose, in a recruitment perspective and get these players
Yeah.
to our door first rather than others.
Hopefully get to Wembley and have a good day out watching commentary rather than the tears that you had as an 8-year-old or whatever it
I
was.
don't
But
see Coventry lose at Wembley, mate. I don't see Coventry
yeah.
alive.
um, role before you joined Coventry was at Colchester. Um, Talk to me about your time at Colchester, and I think that was more on younger children. So talk to me that about your role there.
Yeah, so Coventry was my first. Sorry, Colchester was my first job in the recruitment on the club side. So
Yeah,
exciting opportunity for me. Club that obviously that I played for as a schoolboy, and I learned a lot there. I did learn a lot there. I was job title was as such was Academy Chief Scout. But to be fair, Christian, I did focus predominantly on 16s to 21, so same sort of
yeah,
age group. However, because of um, situations that occurred in the building, like people leaving the club and going to other clubs and what have you, I did end up doing a little bit younger than that, and I did help out on some of the sort of YDPs, so 14s, 15s, 16s. I did a lot of under 16s in the first part of last season. So from say August to December, before those scholarship decisions are being made, I was doing a lot of under 16s games, which and the scouts will tell you this, it's difficult because you don't get team sheets.
yeah,
And when you're going in sort of blind like I was, because of my previous role, I wasn't really doing under 16s matches. Um,
mm,
I had to really rely on my network.
yeah,
And to be fair, they were really helpful. And I think part of that was because I've got a good relationship with them, but also because I was at Colchester, and that's no disrespect to Colchester, but when I'm standing next to clubs Premier League and Cat One scouts, we're sort of fishing in a different market. Does that make sense?
100%, mate.
So
100% makes sense.
therefore, they were happy to sort of tell me who the right side centre back is at Arsenal if I didn't know it. But what I found out, doing those games is you really want a goalkeeper that talks well,
Yeah,
because you're listening to him and he's like, yeah, go on, Christian. And you're like, all right side centre back's Christian. Do you know what I mean? So then I could go to one of my contacts and go, yeah, right side centre back at Arsenal under 16, about 5'10", mixed race. What's his name? Christian. He goes, yeah, Christian, whatever, for example. Listen, that's made up, but that's just an example of how it works. So you're trying to watch the game, but you're also trying to work out who the players are. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? So that
It's
was
a
really a learning curve for me.
Is it you saying that, Scott? It's actually a lot harder gig, isn't it? As you say, like at 18 and above, there's team sheets. Like a person going into say kids football recruitment, like it is networking. You got to build good relationships with people. You've got to be out and about. Like it's two different worlds, right?
No, it isn't. It's also like games. You've just got to do loads and loads of games. And I think that, again, depending on the club you're working at, if you're working at a big Cat 1 club, then you might have 7 clubs that you specialise in or that you cover.
Yeah,
So you're based in East London. So you're going to go do the Orient, you're going to do West Ham, you go out to Ipswich because it's out that way. Do you know what I mean? You're going to do Tottenham and you're going to do Arsenal. Now, if you're watching their 14s, 15s, and 16s every single week, and they're your
mm,
clubs, then you'll get there. You'll get there. Does that make sense? You'll pick them up
yeah,
and but when you're going there like I was, as like, okay, generally speaking, I would go to Tottenham, Arsenal, West Ham because they're my local Cat One clubs, and I might then see them play against a team that's from further up north, and then you're trying to watch the game while also trying to get the names, because when that decision gets made at the end of December and they come out on trial, you need to be able to go, right, Bosh, I do remember him, I watched him. So it's a tough gig, a really tough gig. And I did that for the first part of the 23-24 season at Colchester. Because the person that was doing the younger ones left, I think in September, October time. And obviously we were trying to prepare for the scholarship intake. But whilst doing that, I'm also a little bit under pressure trying to look at all of the non-league games. Again,
mm,
good market for someone like Colchester. Can you take a boy from step 2 or 3 or 4 and try and put them into the development squad because they had a Cat 2 status? So they were obviously, it had a 21s team. And then can they therefore then get into the first team? You know, I want to say it's an easier gig, but it's easier getting a boy from step 3 into a League 2 club than it is to get him into a Championship club, right? So,
of course.
um, it was then trying to cover that area as well, whilst also trying to cover obviously all the boys that are coming out of the cat ones and the other cat twos, like the cat championship clubs, for example, who's coming out of Charlton, who's coming out of Millwall, Bournemouth, etc. So it was a really broad role. And again, when you're working at a club, a smaller club, then you don't have the same resources perhaps as you're working at a bigger club. So you've got more responsibility. So my focus was supposed to be the 16s to 20s, 21s for the development squad, but I did spend a bit of time doing some work with, as I say, the under 16s predominantly, and occasionally the odd talent ID for 14s and 15s, and helping out my academy head of recruitment, who was a great guy, still is a great guy. So yeah, so that was a learning curve, mate, sharp learning curve.
Mm,
And again, not too far from where I live. Um, I've got affection for the club because obviously I put the shirt on, right? So
mm.
yeah, it was a good start to my club career on a recruitment perspective.
Did it sort of did it give you a good basis to for what you're doing now? Like obviously you've learned new skills, you've learned, as you say, processes that you need to put into sort of action. So I should imagine that give you a good grounding for what you're doing now, right? Obviously it's slightly different, but you ultimately you're still doing the same job, just a little bit different age groups.
Yeah, exactly right. It was definitely the grounding that I needed. You're like I was saying before about the sort of, if you're doing the 14s, 15s, 16s in the sort of in a little area with 6 or 7 clubs, you're going to pick up the players. So what I was doing when I was doing the non-league and obviously the older age groups,
Mm,
getting to know you're getting to know all the players at all the clubs. So
mm,
that then means that when they might have been an under 18 when I was doing it for Colchester, they're now an under 19 when I'm doing it at Coventry. Does that make sense? So
yeah,
it's your work, your knowledge base, focusing on the same age groups. It's just progressive, right? And it's becoming bigger. And that was the start of it. And now, as I say, slightly different now, clearly because of the levels of player. But that doesn't mean that if I could find a player that I thought was going to get into, it was good enough to get into Coventry's first team, then at Colchester, I'm definitely trying to get him in. Does that make sense? Because,
cool.
but again, it's basically, um, it's it's a similar environment in the sense that we're Cat 2. It's a similar environment that we've got a 21 side, but obviously the first team gap is bigger. Um, but there's bigger resources. So it was just the next step in my career, mate. It basically going from League Two to the Championship. So it made sense for me.
That makes total sense, mate. So I know obviously you spoke about your phone and document. Do you still have a little black book? Because as I say, I've always had a book where if I see a player, I'll just write down the game and some attributes and their name, who they're playing for, position. And I think coming back into doing more football stuff out the finance world, like even now, like I do a session or I do a group session, I'll come home and write, like I've got different books. I'll come home and write a session down on what I did and how I set it up, etc. So, do you have a database, Scotty? Do you keep team sheets? Is that, or is it just purely just your trusted iPhone now?
No, do you know what? It's funny you say that. I don't. I have got a little book that I use.
Yeah,
Brother bought for me when I got my first job on the club side and with
yeah,
the initials, etc. Lovely. So I have got that, and that will stay with me forever because it's my first book and it's got a lot of information in there.
yeah.
Um,
Walking
team
around like
sheet.
Del Boy, yeah, under
This
your arm with your initials on it.
is it. This is it. I I keep the team sheets. If ever I get a team sheet, I keep them. I put them in a folder. And um, again, not necessarily of use, but when I'm doing the match report, I have it next to me. And if
Yeah,
I'm typing online and when I'm updating the database, which is what you said there, I will. If someone mentions the player to me or I see a player, I'll write it in my phone. And then what I've got is I've got a database which um, I upload, and then it gets uploaded onto the recruitment analyst, it uploads it onto a dashboard for the emerging
Yeah.
talent. So and I've also got obviously a spreadsheet that is basically non-league flags as well, and I stick it on there. So like I wouldn't say I'm particularly like up to scratch with all this technology and all this chat GBT and all that sort of stuff.
Nah.
But I do now use my phone and my laptop and sort of save it on the OneDrive, etc., just in case anything goes wrong, and I back up my phone all the time because yeah, it has got all the information. If I did do it all in my black book, a lot of it needs to be transferred onto the systems, mate. So therefore, you are
Mm.
a lot more work. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I'm definitely not old school with a little black book. And like I've got my spreadsheet, as I say, with all the contacts at the clubs if I need tickets, etc., etc. So I save all that, so I can email the club and go, can I have access to this game? So I've got
Sure.
that all in place and online as opposed to on the in a black book, mate.
So you touched on something there interesting, and Pat spoke about it when we spoke. Is the organisation that it goes in to get to a game. So let's just say you brought something up there. Let's just say you want to go and watch a player and he's in the league or maybe conference south. How do you arrange getting like a access or a ticket or a pass without actually going down the route of just turning up, buying a ticket and put it on your expenses? How do you go about that? Is there a route that you have to follow?
Yeah, again, so if it's a non-league game like a conference prem or a conference south,
Yeah,
most clubs are accommodating. There are a few that aren't.
yeah,
Won't allow scouts in or give them comps.
yeah.
Um, but you'd email as much of in advance as you could. If it's a
Hmm.
Premier League, if it's an academy game, then you ideally do it before 12 o'clock on the Thursday or a
Yeah.
Saturday. But for a non-league game, you'd send an email to the secretary. You'd ask them for ticket access to the game, and if they've got a parking space, would it be possible? Generally speaking, they come back and they acknowledge it, and you get a ticket on the gate or in reception, depending on the size of the club. And if you're lucky, you get a parking space. And that's it. And then you go along and you show you. And every club's different. I mean, there's certain clubs that I've gone to, and like step 3 this season, and I say, oh, please come into the boardroom and say hello and introduce yourself. And I've done it a couple of times. But ultimately, when you go in there, they do then start asking you why you're there. So you tend
Yeah.
not to sort of you want to show gratitude for them, obviously showing you hospitality, etc. And
Yeah.
on the flip side, you don't want to go too much. There are times where you get a ticket put on for you if you know the club or if you know somebody at the club. So that happens in non-league, or sometimes you just don't let them know you're going, mate, and you go
Yeah.
cope, on a better word, where you don't want to flag up that you're watching a player, and
Yeah.
therefore you go and pay, and then you claim back on your expenses. So
Yeah.
that's generally how you do it. But again, it's like you've got to be sort of prepared, and like, I mean, I just got asked, I don't know if it was yourself or if it was someone I spoke to earlier on, like, what am I doing on Saturday? I haven't decided yet. I've decided
Yeah.
what I'm going to go to, but today being Thursday will be the day where I'll go through the fixtures and I'll go, right, do you know what? I'm going to go and watch this kid at non-league because they're
Yeah.
playing X or Y, and that's closer than me going to that game. But then again, I might look at that and go, actually, I can't do that game because um, it'd be better off doing this other chap here because he's playing on Tuesday up in Newcastle, whereas this
Yeah.
one, the other one, although it's closer to me on Saturday, on Tuesday he's actually at home. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? He's
Yeah.
5 minutes away. So you sort of try and manage your sort of diary, and you try and be cute, for want of a better word, as to which games you go to. But again, likewise, if you know that there's a player that's highly rated, if you know there's a few other clubs that are sniffing at him, then you probably have to go and watch him the first game you can go and watch him. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You got to
Wait,
be quick.
yeah. If he has a blinder on the Saturday, 7 day goes in that Saturday night, they're 3 days ahead of me. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
and that, by the way, that takes time as well. So when you go
No,
to the web pages and you're looking at the games and the different steps, which is a great website for sort of organising yourself, they also don't have all the club information on there. They'll just have like a generic email address. So then you might have to go to the Ryman or the Isthmian website, click on the club, and then they might have the name of the secretary there. Do you know what I mean? Or you might have to go onto the club website to get the secretary to make sure that your ticket application is going to the right person.
yeah,
Makes
no,
sense.
mate. It all makes sense. And as I say,
That all takes
organisation.
time, Constant. That all takes
Yeah,
time.
of course it does. Organisation is key. I remember just organising my travel overseas constantly. In the fintech space, that does take up a lot of time. But my brain's telling me that that takes up a lot of time. You're very organised, but my heart's telling me so. If they've got a good spread in the boardroom, you're going to declare and get yourself in there at half time. And if it's not, you're going to go covert, yeah, and dress up in some kind
Yes,
of
you've known me a long
some
time. You've known me a
so,
long
so, some kind of costume. So that's a great insert, as you say, culture star, learning the trade, giving you the skills now to put into place, etc. But I think where would know you or I know you from, and obviously where you spent a lot of time. You was an agent. You had your own agency. You worked in collaboration with other agencies. Like, talk to me about the life of a football agent, really. So, yeah, tell me how you got into it. Tell me about your practice, and yeah, we can dig into that.
Yeah, so if I take you back just a little bit before that, I was in recruitment. So I ran my own IT recruitment company.
Yeah,
And um, a lot of similarities between being a recruitment agent and a football agent. Okay. Managing expectations, looking after people, trying to create opportunities. So I I sort of fell out of love with it, got let down a few times on the recruitment side of things, on IT, and it was around the sort of credit crunch times, 2007, 2008. Obviously, so things were more difficult in the markets. Um, and I'd always, as you know, I was managing at the time in non-league, and I also happened to have, you know, a pretty good network of friends that were either involved in the game or their families were involved in the game.
Yeah.
So it logically just led to me, liking the idea of becoming a football agent. I think around that time, mate, I probably still thought I was going to be a pro myself. So why not? If I can't be a pro, why not try and assist pros? But no, on a serious note, it was something that I wanted to be involved in, and I had the opportunity because I was in the non-league environment, and because I knew people, as I say, in the game. It opened a few doors, and I then just started to sort of. I did my exam. I passed my agency exam, and I was starting out doing it sort of part time on my own. But I was also obviously earning my crust as a recruitment agent. And I think, to be honest with you, I having owned my own business for however many years, 19, whatever years it was, going to work for somebody was always going to be difficult. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
You're your own boss, and I manage people, and therefore I thought, right, well, I'll set this up on my own. I'll start. I had a friend of mine that was a lawyer that helped me out, etc. And I just started to build my stable up. I think at one point I had that 23 players that were like predominantly all non-league players, or
Mm.
were like under 16s boys that playing in what would be classed as maybe the equivalent of the EJA now, locally
Yeah.
to us. Good players. And I started putting on the odd showcase game for them. And a couple of them become scholars at clubs like Torquay and Crawley, so the cat free type clubs. Um, and I just built my stable up from there. But because of obviously it being still working at the same time, I couldn't put all of my hours into it. And obviously, when you're dealing with scholars, you're not really turning over a pound note. You're just
No.
sort of you're setting the infrastructure up. You know what I mean? You're setting the foundations up. And then it progressed, and then I got better players, and then I was obviously trying to build my stable up. But at the time, one of my good friends who was a Premier League player, he said to me, "Look, it's a tough gig. Maybe go and join." an agency, a bigger agency. And I spoke to somebody he helped me out with, and I didn't do it. And listen, we can all have regrets in life, and we all look back and think how we could have done things, and things would have probably been different. But I was determined, focused to do it on my own, and I had success. I've got some good players, but I was never able to compete with the big boys. And eventually, Christian, it got to the point, as you know, that I had a few good players, but sadly, um, I ended up losing them because I couldn't compete with the bigger brands, and it became a little bit demoralising, because I was trying to do it the right way. Do you know what I mean? I was always trying to do what was right for the boys and the parents, and there were times when I did deals and I didn't even get paid on it because it was almost like, well, the club aren't going to pay me, and I'm not going to jeopardise the kids' chances of going to a football club, whether it be a
Sure.
pro or whatever, just because I'm not going to earn a pound note out of it. So I carried it on for too long. There's without a shadow of a doubt. I know that for a fact. And then at the end of when it was coming to near the end, I was then doing consultancy work as well because I had to obviously pay bills. So, but what it did do is it built my network. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it also built a lot of trust as well because I think it'd be fair to say that I was that one of those agents. And by the way, there's some good agents out there. There's also some bad agents, but there's also bad travel agents and insurance agents and estate agents. Do you know what I mean? So every industry's got the good ones and the bad ones. And I tried to be that agent that had a great reputation, didn't chuck a load of mud, would only send players that I thought were suitable and build a reputation like that. And I think I did that quite well. And I think I got the trust of a lot of people in the game. And that's what's now sort of set me up now and helping me on this side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can't control human beings and how they feel and emotions. And that's the reason, as I say, I sort of fell out of love a little bit with IT recruitment because you get let down. You try and help these people get new jobs, etc., etc., and then ultimately they were just using you to try and get a pay rise at their own club, own company.
Yeah.
But then you're talking about like it's my job. It's the money that helps me put food on my kids' table. So it's all very well they've just gone through the process of trying to go for a job that I think they're genuinely interested in, but actually what they've just done is just gone and got 10, 15 grand pay rise at their own company. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it fell out of love of it, and like I say, and then from the footballing agency perspective, it was the same, mate. Unfortunately, and I'm somebody that believes there's certain attributes in a person that I like and that you should have, and I think one of them, for example, is loyalty. Okay, and a lot of people will listen to this and go, "There's not a lot of loyalty in football, Scott," and there isn't. We know that, but ultimately, if you're trying to do the right thing and you're trying to do the best for your client, and I always was, um, I got let down. I got let down a few times, and unfortunately, like I say, you can't do much about human beings' emotions and when they're getting people in their ear and when they're thinking or they're looking on social media or they're looking at, oh, this guy, this is the biggest agency in the country, where are they going to help us out? And I'm almost like, well, yeah, you'll be a small fish in a big pond. Do you know what I mean? And are they going to care for you as much as I was going to care for you? But ultimately, it happened too many times, mate, where I was like, God, really? I've just done so much work for you, and I've just looked out for you, and I've just driven up to X to watch you so many times. And do you know what I mean? I've given you pairs of boots and all this sort of stuff. And you just get let down, unfortunately. And unfortunately, it took its toll on me, really. And obviously, financially, it wasn't there for, you're losing that those players that's your earnings, right? That's what you see. So got to the point where, I decided, and it took a while to get from the dark side, as it's known, onto the club side. It took a while, and again through my network, I managed to get that opportunity. But what it did do is it taught me a lot.
Mm.
Uh, it made my network much bigger, and that's now helping me in this role. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it was hard work. It is hard work. It's not a particularly nice part of the game in the sense that people can let you down and for no reason whatsoever, just because they feel that the grass is greener elsewhere. They're not always liked from the club side, which is hard because when you're a good agent, or when I say good agent, when you're a sort of an agent with morals, that can be tough because you're all tarred with the same brush.
Yeah.
Uh, but like I say, it when I did see it, like a couple, like for example, and this sounds really like when I see a boy from Enfield that went on trial to Torquay, okay, and got a scholarship there. When I see him sign that form, and when I see his old man, who is still a friend of me now, so say to me, Scott, thank you so much. If it wasn't for you, and I still watch him, he still plays step two, mate. Um, you still see the dad, and the dad just has got so much sort of gratitude towards you because he knows that you did so much for his boy. And I don't think I probably didn't make hardly any money out of that kid. But the point was, it was so good to see these boys thrive. Do you know what I mean? And get that opportunity and to move on. And I think a lot of the time I did the agency gig, there were moments when it's like sometimes watching you know like your own family make their debut. Does that make
Sure.
sense? And that
Yeah.
happened a few times. There was a boy I looked after made his first international appearance under 17s. I was up there. And in fact, to be fair, my old man came with me because we shared the drive. And like it was just fantastic, Christian. Do you know what I mean? To see these kids who you've given an opportunity to and helped out make that step. Now, that's all really nice and great, but ultimately that didn't pay the bills. Do you know what I mean? But I've made some good friends out of that. And I think I always did it with integrity. Um, and yeah, now it also helps me on this side, mate, because I've been an agent. And it's funny that when you speak to some of these agents now, you're talking away, and not so much now because they know my background, but when I first started doing it, you'd have them on the phone talking this, that, and I just turn to them, yeah, I was on that side for 10 years. And then all of a sudden, conversation changed slightly. They sort of realize that they're talking to somebody that's been on that side. Does that make sense? And therefore, I don't know, you can't kid a kidder, or, I know how the industry works. And then, like, I was then sort of telling them what they wanted to not hear, but telling them, like, as in, I can tell them, like, blow smoke up them or whatever. But I was actually telling them the truth. Does that make sense? I was saying to them, look, I don't think he's going to be good enough. So if you've got an opportunity elsewhere, then I'll take him there. Now, as an agent, you want to hear that. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? You want to hear the truth. So I'm like this recruiter now on this side that was being a little bit more like, I've worked on your side, and they send the player to me, and I'll just go, right, he's not for us because we've got X, Y, and Z in the building, and I don't think he's particularly good at this. I've watched him on this day, so he probably won't be for us, mate. And I'll get a response back. Really appreciate that, Scott. Thanks for letting me know. And as an agent, you then know that, right, Colchester or Coventry, wherever I am, that's not an option. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that that's again helped me from being on that side to manage agents better. Does that make sense? And help sort of build a relationship with them, because agents are a very important part of football. They're even more important now, as you touched on earlier on when you talked about the non-league boys and the academy boys. A lot of players have got agents now, and you listen, you know the good agents, and you know the agents that perhaps you can't trust as much. But again, that's the same as anything in life, right? You need to work out who's who and who's good at what and who's not.
Is it harder now than ever, Scotty, for smaller agents to compete with the big boys? Are they just getting swallowed up?
100%,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. And there's a lot. Listen, there's a lot of mergers that happen, but ultimately, you've got to realise that the it's the same in the football in the Premier League, mate. You've got certain clubs that have got the power, they've got the money. Okay, that doesn't mean that's necessarily, as we know from a certain club, that have got the highest expenditure on fees, etc., and where they are in the league this year. It doesn't mean it brings success. But what I'm saying is it's the same with the agencies. You've got a certain number of agencies that are massive, and they have got the resources, they have got the runners, they've got the people that are watching the most games, they've got
Mm.
the people that are active, speaking to the parents or speaking to the players, etc. And they've also got some of the top agents that have done the biggest deals.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, and their branding and the social media and listen, let's get it right. If you're playing for, I'll use an example. If you're playing for, be careful with, if you're playing for Chelsea and the academy system, okay, and you know that the right winger that's a similar type of player to you, same sort of attributes that you aspire to. If he's being looked after by Agent X, and Agent X come knocking on your door, and they've also got Agent Y knocking on the door on Agent Z, there's a very good chance that they'll go. And by the way, Agent X are the big boys. There's a very good chance that player will go with them. Okay, because they've got the better players in the stable. They've got players that the players can relate to at the same club, and that's how it works. It's very difficult as a small per agent when you might have a really good up and coming player. If you haven't got Championship or Premier League players in your stable, then there's an element, and again, it's all about the parents, Christian. It's their mindset. It's their mindset. Ultimately, they help make decisions predominantly for these kids. And if they don't feel that you're big enough or have, enough clout, then they will always go with a bigger agency. They feel that's what's right for their kids. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if it's a really, really good player, then all the big boys start having to compete with each other. And how they do that, listen, I'm sure that's a conversation for another day.
Sure, but having been on both sides of the fence, Scotty, which I think is quite unique, like I think getting your insight would be quite invaluable. What could, there are parents that listen to this podcast. What would you say is a good bit of advice for parents if they're, let's just say their boy is getting to that stage where, or girl, that they're looking at agents? What, I'm not asking you to suggest agents, but like what should you be looking for? What are the bits of advice you can give them?
Just before I answer that, it's interesting you say it's quite unique, because it's not so unique when it goes the other way. So it's when the people are working in the clubs,
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
leave the
yeah,
club and go to the agency side.
yeah,
You're right. It is quite unique that it goes from being on the agent side to then going on to the club side. And like I said, listen, I'm not.
people normally go the other way for the money, Scotty, didn't they seem
And
to.
that's it, and that's me being brutally honest with you. Is
Yeah,
that I wasn't prepared to go and work for one of the big boys, and therefore I couldn't sustain what I was doing, and I
yeah,
kept losing. So I had to go to the other side. Okay, and I'm not afraid to admit that.
yeah,
That's is what it is. Um, but likewise, I wasn't prepared to give up on my principles. Hence the reason why I did it. So I'm going back to obviously what you said there about what would be the best thing to do. Do you know what? That's a really, really tough question, because, as you know, and we've discussed previously, the I think the generation now is different to when we were younger, and I know that's different because they probably, I think, Eric Hall and that lot were, and obviously Guycy, etc. There weren't
yeah,
many agents around, but I think that the generation of the parents nowadays is and the mindset, and I think it's all a lot of it's driven by social media, etc., is very different. Okay, and there's this huge urge for everybody or their kids to be a professional footballer. Okay, and therefore, a lot of them will probably think, well, if I get an agent, then he'll be able to increase my opportunities for my boy, etc., etc. And again, that is probably right if you've got the right agent. Does that make sense? So, in theory, I would always say people by people. Okay, go with somebody that you feel you can trust, and somebody that you feel is going to do what's right for your child, boy or girl. Okay. Now, there are big agencies that are perhaps that have got a division, for want of a better word, or certain agents that will deal with maybe a young one that's trying to get, or a non-league player that's trying to get into
yeah.
the professional game.
A
If
different
you're a
level.
non-league player going in, if you're talking about a non-league player going into the professional game, then I think you need to look at agencies that have basically got experience or proven results of moving players
Mhm.
from there to there. Okay, that's what I would say, because the bigger agencies predominantly will only go near a non-league player if they are like going to be top players. Does that make sense? And that's
Yeah,
tough. Whereas the smaller agencies that perhaps specialise in non-league players and moving them. And do you know what? When I was on that side, I did that a few times. That was a great feeling seeing them go um, a non-league to a professional environment. But there are ones out there that do that very, very well. Okay. So my advice would be if you're a non-league, or try and find one of those types of agents. If you're an under 18 and you're in the academy environment, again, it depends on what your levels are, mate. Does that make sense? If
Yeah.
you are like a top player, really good player, and you know that there's a professional deal on the contract on the table, and you think that you might have other clubs that might be interested, then it's a different decision to somebody that thinks they might be getting released. Does that make sense? Because there will be the bigger agencies, and again, this is very, very broad, by the way, but the bigger agencies might not be as interested in finding a player that's released from a Cat 2 club a professional deal. Does that make sense? They'd be
Yeah.
more interested in the Cat 1 boys or the Cat 2 boys, or even the Cat 3 boys that they think they can move to a Cat 1.
Yeah.
Okay. So again,
It's all money driven, isn't it? It's all
that's exactly right. So
coming out
therefore,
of Cat 2, there's maybe not that much money in it.
well, this is it, and that's why. But that's why it's slightly different on where your child's at. Now, listen, half the problem is a lot of parents think their kids are that player that's going to go on and play in the Premier League. Do you know what I mean? So that might judge their or cloud their judgment. However, I always feel that like there are good agents out there that will look after you and they will do their best for you. And sometimes it doesn't work. Do you know what I mean? I had players where we'd look at different options on the table, and we'd sit around the table with the parents. We'd go, right, A is this. Yeah, it's good location, whatever. B is this, paying a bit more money. And we'd all go, yeah, it's got to be option D. And then 6 months later down the line, like it's the wrong option for whatever reason, because new manager, or because didn't settle, or because whatever reason it might be,
Yeah.
you never get it right. But I think when you're talking about your kid's career, you need to get one that you trust. That is the most important thing. One that you can trust. And ultimately, when they do give an agent the opportunity to find something your club, don't let the outside noise affect you. Do not let the outside noise affect you. Don't listen to people on the sidelines saying, "Oh yeah, X is watching or Y is watching," and don't start putting pressure on the agent. Do you know what I mean? Because as you know, mate, there's so much chat that is so untrue,
Yeah.
and rumor mill and this, and ultimately, it's in the agent's interest to move or do the best thing for your son, because then that would probably be the best thing for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um,
Great
so
advice.
it's again, it's like when you just asked about attributes when you're scouting. It's all dependent on what you're looking for, and likewise from this question about what's best agent, it's what you need and where you are in your journey and
No.
where you level.
I think that's the best advice, really, as you say. You've got everything specific to your son or daughter at their level where they want to get to. But you've touched on it a few times, and we talk about it regular, and I've seen it myself. Why do you think, Scotty, you played good level of football, I played a good level of football, we both went through the academy journey, right? Why would you say now there just seems to be so much more like urgency to get their kid in front of people or in a professional environment, or desperate to get into academy? Like when we were kids, I felt like we just rocked up, played football, and there might have been like 10, 20 people on the sideline. Now under eights games is hundreds of kids, VOs up, you got 8 year olds wearing stat vests. Like what, to me, I just see it as just the money and the fame. But like you obviously say, you've had a real unique experience. You've been an agent, you've been in kids recruitment, you're in first team, you're emerging talent recruitment. Why do you think things have changed so much? Like every time I open up a social media app, for instance, I see showcase game, parents paying 150 quid to play in this game that just with a load of scouts there. And I just struggle to get my head around it. Foundation or these centres, or my kids in the academy. All right, where's he playing? Or he's in the foundation at X. Well, that's not an academy. How much are you paying for that? Oh, it's £200 a month for. I just I just don't know if it was maybe we're getting old and obviously your thoughts glaze when you get older. But why do you think there's been such a massive shift in like that part of football? Because I just can't understand it myself.
Nor can I, mate. Genuinely, I don't know what it is. And you know what I'm like, mate. I say it as it is. I hate it. I really don't like it.
I'm the same. I think it's the biggest. Like
It
you know,
bothers me so much. It
I
bothers me so
speak
much.
I speak to parents now, like obviously, as you know, Bert come out of Orient, he's been playing grassroots. I'm running an EGA team, and it's like, yeah, I'd like to get my boy in EGA into the EGA team. You know, he's got academy commitments. I'll be like, well, he can't play then, can he? He can't play academy. Oh no, he's in the development centre at X. I'm like, one, that's not an academy. Two, you're paying for that. Three, it's just people's mindset is like even now, like just the year up sort of term and obsession with playing your kid a year up. Like I just feel like in our day we rocked up, we played district, we played county football, we went through the academy system. Like we come out in an era where I feel like we just rocked up, played football, went home, played football, got on with it. I know times change and maybe that's it, the social media element, the money, but I just always ask the question. I can't put my finger on it other than just money.
I think you're right. I think like, I mean, it's funny you talk about the academies when we were younger, and again, this might sound a little bit big time, but when we were younger, if you played for an academy, you were a good player.
Yeah, 100%.
Agreed. And I think I think there was a West Bromwich Albion development centre down in Hertford, which was unheard of, really, especially a
That's
club.
bro, in Turnford.
Why
What?
not? Why not? Yeah. So, um, but you very, very heard about these development centres or
Yeah,
these satellite centres. So, whenever you played as a kid, when we were younger, um, you played. I mean, to be fair, I don't even know this because when I was at Luton as an under nine, I think it was,
yeah,
uh, and that was on Kenilworth Road because it was plastic, right? But I
yeah,
didn't play for Luton. I didn't play a match for Luton, so I think in theory that's probably I was playing with the boys that were playing on Saturday, but whether I was there for class as a development centre or not, I don't know. And that then moved from there to a hall in Dunstable, which would have definitely been a development centre. But at the time, it was just like it was an opportunity, and my dad was happy to take me there, right?
yeah,
Then obviously when I went into Colchester, that was a bit further down the line. But during that period, there were players that obviously I played with or against, like you, some of in your team, and the same for my brother who was 5 years younger. They would play, they would go to the academies, and it was not a big thing. It was like, oh yeah, Jamie's doing well, he's over at Watford or whatever. But you could still
yeah.
play for your grassroots team. So I'm playing for Colchester, but I'm also playing for Buxton Saints. Do you know what I mean?
I say that all the time to people. I think that was a big thing, right? I
It's
remember
important.
like when we were kids, you'd have free games sometimes. You'd play on a Saturday for your district, you play maybe Saturday afternoon for, who's at Colchester, Norwich or West, whatever. And then Sunday you might have two games again. You might play for the Sports Centre or Broxbourne and then for Academy in the afternoon. Just got on with it. Now I think,
And you did school games as well, by the way. So I'd play school like during the winter term. I'd play rugby,
yeah,
right,
same, yeah,
in the afternoon, okay, and then on a Saturday, and then to be fair, at that age, you Saturday night you weren't really going out, but then on a Sunday morning, I'd go over to Essex University, play for Colchester, but
yeah,
because obviously, as you know, my dad was a manager of Saints. He'd
yeah,
try and arrange the games on the Sunday to be like 2 o'clock kickoff, whatever, and he'd rush me back. And occasionally I'd play for Saints on the
yeah.
afternoon. So you're playing like three, but it was never sort of, you were never told, oh, you can't play if you can't play for your grassroots team. No, you can't do that. It was just like, that was it. And listen, maybe in hindsight, maybe why my knees are in bits now. But at the end of the day, that was how it was. But there was never like this urgency to be a professional footballer. And I think you hit the nail on the head, man. I don't know. I'm going to chuck this out there. Has this started since the Only Way is Essex and all those reality TV shows and Fame have started? Is this when it changed? And social media, maybe. Do you know what I mean? I think that the whole social media aspect is definitely a part of the driver, and people, you know, showcasing themselves and putting stuff on the internet to say that their kid's done this, or they do a little dribbling, or their one-on-ones and all this. And likewise, the one-on-one coaches are putting it on there because they all want to. I mean, the number of players that end up coming through, into a professional environment. I mean, sometimes you have 3 or 4 different private academies trying to take the credit. Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit embarrassing, really, because they've had one session with that private one-on-one coach. They'll try and jump on it. And listen, it's so unfortunate, but that is the way the world has gone. That is the way that society is now. The fact that you mentioned about the satellite systems, I mean, again, I can't mention particular clubs, but local to where I live, there's clubs that are making good money.
Yeah, and that's
And
what.
by the way, the coaches, and this is no disrespect to them, they probably got less coaching badges than I've got. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean? It's
and
like,
that's where I struggle with it, right? Like I, I'd like to think, or you the same, that I've come back into football, I'm doing my own thing, but there's been instances already where I was like, I don't think your kid should be here. I'd send him somewhere else. Like he's better than this, or he's not up to this standard. But I don't think like there is any of that that goes along, and that's the thing that bothers me. That in these satellite centres, for instance, they might be in, and this is no disrespect, they might be in Division 6 on a Sunday, under 13s, for instance, yet they're going to XYZ development centres. And I think, why are you doing that? Like, why are you paying for that? Just keep them in grassroots. They're enjoying it. It's probably a fraction of the cost. It's like the JPL thing, the explosion of JPL football and the money that seems to go through that, and now people are not playing Sunday morning football. I just think everyone's become obsessed with getting in somewhere where if you're good and you're playing grassroots football somewhere at the right age or the right level, you're gonna get found. Like like as you know now, we've had numerous conversations in the last week. If you're playing well at a decent level, you're going to get some in this day and age. Someone's going to come across you.
yeah,
Um,
you can't hide. There's so many scouts out there now, and this is the thing. Like when we were younger, like you'd have like clubs that would only have one scout
yeah,
through the
exactly.
area. Do you know what I mean? And they generally, listen, let's get it right. They generally would go to I think I got scouted as for Luton in the rep side.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? I'm playing in the rep side, so it was obviously the strongest players in the league.
yeah,
I remember, I think it was over at Pang, I think it was Pangang or Stevenage, I can't remember. And I got scouted. Matty Hampton was in that side. And
yeah,
a few other, I think Harlow boys were in that side. But that was a scout, by the way, who's still in the game. It's brilliant. I see him on the circuit. But I'd always say to him, "Cool, you had a good eye for a player, by the way." As a
yeah,
bit of banter. But he basically was like the only scout in that area. But
yeah,
nowadays, it's just like phenomenal, the number of scouts. And a lot of them are just volunteers, and a lot of
yeah,
them are now the club's managers. Yeah, so that like they're linked to a club. So that's how it's generally works. So you're 100% right. If you are a good player, you will get an opportunity.
yeah,
Then, if you get an opportunity to go into a development centre, is one of the bigger clubs, then you've got to then look at it. How long am I in this development centre for?
yeah,
Are they just keeping you there because they think you're a late developer or whatever, or are you going to get an opportunity? And I think, to be fair, a lot of these clubs, they do like once monthly, they do a game where they play them
yeah,
against the academy side. So I get that. But again, it's when some of them then start going, right, well, it's going to cost you 150 quid and you're going to get a tracksuit and all this stuff. You almost,
yeah,
I would look at it and go, nah, not for me. That's then a big money making exercise for the club, right? However, you parents, a lot of them, they just cling on to that hope that they will get the opportunity. Now, for me, and as you know, like we went out. Obviously, you couldn't get there. We went out for a reunion, my under 18s team at Stalford. I still speak to a lot of my mates that I played football with, grassroots. It is so important socially that these boys and girls that they play with their friends.
Yeah.
Okay, the cream will always rise. Okay, you always need a little bit of luck in life and in football, especially. You do need to play well that time that somebody's there watching you. But ultimately, if it's a good scout and you don't have necessarily the best game, they'll look for your attributes. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? They'll look that you might be the smallest player on the pitch, okay, and be really good technically, right? A good scout might see as he walks off the pitch, go and see him walk up to his mum and dad. Do you know what I mean? The dad might be 6'3". Do
Yeah,
you know what I
exactly.
mean? So you look at it and you think, well, he might be a late developer.
Mm.
But what my point I'm making is there's always people there, and like I say, if you do have a really good game, and if you are the best player and you play best every single week, you're going to get an opportunity.
100%.
You don't get an
Totally
opportunity.
agree with that.
Don't do all of your spare money, okay, from your income, trying to do one-on-ones or paying 150 quid to go into an environment where do you know what I mean? You're trying to put yourself on a showcase. Trust the process is what I would say, but also look at it from a social perspective. Look at it from creating friends. I go out, and I'm sure you're exactly the same, mate. I go out and go out for a drink with me, my wife, and my kids. And if I'm local, there'll be someone that I'll say hello to. And the
Yeah,
missus has a
100%.
running joke with me, and she'll go, "Go on, which club did he play for with you?"
Yeah,
And I'm like, "Oh, I played with him at St Meg's." Do you know what I mean? And I just think that's invaluable. I think that's important. I think
100%.
that's more. There's more to life than trying to push, because what people need to understand, right? And me and you could probably list a load of players that we played with or against. Very few of our pals made it, did they? Do you know what I mean? There's two. I think that we know that properly made it. But the number of players that we felt that were really good players that didn't make it, okay, or the number of players that perhaps weren't quite good enough, all right, whatever. The number of players that do make it is minimal.
Yeah,
It
100%.
is, and nowadays there are players that get a scholarship. There are players that get a first year pro. Okay, so they can be classed as a professional footballer. I get it. But the number that don't make a living out of the game and come out at a young age, and some of them have spent from 6 years all the way up to 16 and don't get a scholarship. And some of them that get all the way through get a scholarship and then get released at 18. Or some of them that get a scholarship and then a first year pro and then get released and they're playing step three. It's so tough to make it to the top level to earn a living out the game. And I just think that based on the percentages and the numbers, there are, I'm not going to say you're setting a kid up to fail because you're not, but the majority of them do fail, unfortunately, to make it. There's only a small percent that get these. If you think about the number of clubs that give out scholarships and the number of kids that play football in the country, it is a minute amount that get it.
Yeah, and as you say, like, I think you touched on a few good things there. Think how good your Broxbourne side was, how good my sports centre side was. Probably 80% of us were all at academies. The only one really for us that made it to the top and played in the Premier League was Luke Young. You know, no one. There was a lot of good footballers in that group, and I'd say, again, without being biased, there was better footballers back then now than there is now. I'd say, as I say, it's more athletes, and two, I don't think you can ever put a price on the transferable skills that football can give you, especially playing in the grassroots. You mentioned it. You know, I wouldn't say that, everyone I said hello to probably I liked or they liked me, but before we moved to Leon City with my wife, like in Harlow, you'd go into Tesco, for instance, and Charlotte would get the because I'd have 38 conversations with people, and they
Yeah,
were all football people,
yeah, agreed.
and the friendships that you make, the camaraderie, the transferable skills. I don't think you can put a price on that, and I think in this day and age, a lot of people are sacrificing that for, sort of fake glories. But Scotty, I wanna wrap it up, mate. I know I've taken a lot of your time. I know you've got reports to write. Me personally, obviously, I know what goes into stuff, but I've learned a lot today. I know the listeners will learn. As I say, I think you've got a really unique sort of journey. People might go from the football club to an agent because, again, as money orientated, you've actually gone the other way. You was a really reputable agent that done the right thing for the boys. At times, even though, as you say, it hurt you in the pocket, but now you've actually gone down the football club route. I think you've got a lot of um, sort of experiences and as I say, going back to those transferable skills that will make you very successful in your role. I know we spoke a lot the last week or so. You're one of the only people I think, yeah, you and Guycy and Kev, when they done theirs, you were the only one, that I would ever recommend players to, and still do that now. You're a top man. I really appreciate your time, Scott. And as I say, I know the listeners are going to really appreciate listening to this podcast. So thanks again, mate. And I look forward to speaking to you again this week.
Lovely, mate. Thank you for having me on. And
No, lovely.
always it's been good having a chat with you, mate.
Yeah, lovely, Scott. Take care, mate.
Take care.
Thanks again.